So this is the 1740 hours GMT edition, part 1 of the BabyAngelGeronimo editions of the Khoodeelaar television channel, being broadcast on Monday, 10th of October 2022. And this is being broadcast only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, and not on cable networks. This edition has got a very small question about the item published by the racist Beaverbrook's Legacy, the Daily Express, with the byline given to Richard Medley. Now, Richard Medley is the last person to be acceptable as a voice of reason, let alone a voice of universal human rights. But for a skewered reason, he has been put on the record as saying that Shamima Begum should be allowed to come to the UK. Time for Shamima Begum to come home. We shall go into the details of Richard Medley's meddling. And before we do that, and before we have the sight of the contents of what he says, let me assert that whatever he says in the headline is bound to be exposed as false, because the contents of his so-called argument would be in support of racists, in support of anti-Muslim elements, and in support of the narrative. The narrative that aids and abets those who create the myth or accentuate the myth, exacerbate the myth, aggravate the myth that Muslims are the terrorists or Muslims are terrorists. There is no way that Islam could be referred to as a synonym for terrorism or as approving terrorism. The only argument that could be based on using Islam in relation to terrorism would be in self-defense, universal self-defense. The word Islam is peace. So think about that. How can a religion whose name means peace, how can that allow any damage, harm, violation, injury, hurt being caused to innocent people, which is what terrorism essentially relies on and is about? Because terrorism, by definition, cannot and does not and has never overthrown a state or state-like force. Terrorism is an accidental, incidental, very minor event. It's a stunt. And whatever the motive, whatever the ideology, and Islam is not the only alleged source for terrorists. All the other sources over the last, let's say, 100 years, all the terrorist acts can be described at most as stunts. And secondly, as stupid. And thirdly, as embarrassingly stupid. Because let's take the example of the so-called Islamic terrorists. I mean, all the events that in the Western media or West influenced media in countries like Bangladesh. And Bangladesh has had a season, very hectic season of persecuting what the Bangladesh cabal, the regime, has called terrorists, Islamic terrorists, or Islamists, as the distorted and stupid pronunciation goes, Islamists. Bangladesh is controlled by a series of cabals, all of these cabals are mentally enslaved to various foreign, let's say, sources and agencies. The kind of thing that Imran Khan is now doing, talking about the foreign hukumat, the kind of thing he's doing, identifying the foreign hukumat, including the various cipher communications and all the rest of it, originating from the US diplomatic operations. Those types of influences have been dominant in Bangladesh. And as I said, and I say again, fuck off Lawrence Lifshultz, the American operative, posing as a socialist investigator against so-called CIA. Lawrence Lifshultz is one of the spying cadres of the imperialist machine. And Lifshultz kind of got under the cover, if you like, of the conspirators that flocked both physically and metaphorically into Dhaka in August 1975 in the aftermath of the murder of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Now, as I say, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman should never have been murdered. He should never have been harmed. He should have been, at most or at worst, he should have been treated as a political opponent, and he should have been allowed the fair say if he had any say on anything. He could have been democratically targeted for his regime to be, or his government to be overthrown. All of those were legitimate and should have been done or attempted. But the actual fact that he was murdered, and he was murdered with a number of other people who were members of his family, including children or child, that has never been fully or truthfully accounted for or accounted or published, kind of A to Z, like, one step to the next step to the next step until he was murdered. And the confusion comes from the fact that his name was being used for the imposition at that desperate stage of a thing called the Bakshal. And Bakshal legitimately attracted hostile critics from the country in Bangladesh, because Bakshal was modeled on a fascist dictatorship. Now, there was nothing in the Awami League that Sheikh Mujib was associated with in the 1960s, generally, and there was nothing from the time of the declaration of this so-called 6-point in 1966, which was the year after the war between India and Pakistan. So the 6-point program came closest to declaring a kind of intention to possibly move towards independence from the united Pakistan. But it didn't spell out, and it wasn't a military program. The main accusations against the ruling, controlling junta in then Pakistan was that they were discriminating against the people of East Pakistan and at every level. All of those things were out in the open, openly discussed and debated. And at no point in the years 1966 to 1970 was there any evidence of Sheikh Mujib being part of a democratic forum where they could be taking decisions, policy decisions about the future movement by their party, about the country. There was nobody else. It was only Sheikh Mujib. Now, the so-called news conferences, the public events, they were not styled as news conferences as such, but they were public events where mostly, quote, journalists had access. Now, I attended as many as I could. I can't count because I haven't got a list of the numbers that I attended, but I attended every single one that I could hear about and I could find out about. There was no systematic political kind of propaganda ongoing. Everything about Sheikh Mujib's leadership or his role as a frontman of the Awami League was very, very, very chaotic. Sheikh Mujib never spelt out any manifesto. If anyone says that he did so, I challenge them to bring the evidence forward by chapter and verse and date and time and place. Sheikh Mujib was completely chaotic. And with Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani being in the wider background as the real guru and the master of all the Awami League politics, original Awami League politics that had begun, there was double confusion. Now, there were two representative kind of personalities that Democrats could go for, or Democrats could, genuine, universal Democrats could support or consider supporting, either Maulana Bashani or Sheikh Mujib. As for the remnants, the remainders of the Muslim League, that was not coherent because there were about at least 4 versions of the Muslim League. And we're talking mainly on the land of East Pakistan, not talking about West Pakistan. Now, there was a particular period, a moment, a day, when there was a day-long political rally held in the race course. The race course is just in front of the University of Dhaka Library and the University of Dhaka Mosque. And the race course is to the edge on the other side of the Intercontinental Hotel. And on the border of the race course on the side is, of course, the Institute of Engineers. So that race course was the one where Sheikh Mujib gave his speech in 1971, before he was arrested and then detained by the Pakistan military. But this was the site that is location of another gathering, mainly addressed by assortment of parties and groupings that call themselves Islamic or Muslim. And one of the key organizers was a man whom I gave the name Kekiu Islam. His name was actually Eqm Shafiqul Islam, but I distorted his name because of his dishonesty. Now, Kekiu Islam, in family terms, was related to the Jamaat Islami's Ghulam Azam, but he was not politically aligned with Ghulam Azam, and Ghulam Azam wasn't aligned with him. Islam came to the newspaper that I published in, because all the day-long proceedings that had taken place in the race course were covered by me alone, not other people, but all my bylines and my writings appeared in the front page and elsewhere in the paper. And they were, according to others, not me saying it, very powerfully written and very influential in terms of getting across the image. Now, I didn't support any of the groupings or groups. I actually created a collective image of an ideological aspiration of a scenery, ideas derived from Islam could be applied and expressed to get the people the rights, the people who are denied. Now, Kekiu Islam arrived at the editor's office of that same newspaper the following day, the day that my reports and my dispatches appeared. And the editor called for me to attend his office, which I did. And Kekiu Islam was sitting there. And the editor said to me that this leader is here to complain that you have not given him enough or any real recognition for his part. Now, anyone who doesn't know what I spoke in Dhaka when I was in Dhaka, I really mainly spoke in English. I didn't speak in Bengali, I spoke in English and I spoke in Siloti. Now, that is what I still do. And the reason is very clear, but I'll come to that again, update the reason. So I spoke in English and I said, "Who is he?" And the editor said, "You know who he is." I said, "Of course I know his name." And Kekiu Islam attempted to tell me something about my journalistic duty. I said, "I'm not a journalist. I am not on hire. I'm a thinker." And I thought about the best summary of what happened and I wrote it. I don't have any obligation, never had and never will, to specifically promote an individual political, either you or anybody else. And I duly left the editor's office. That was the last that I heard of Kekiu Islam, or at least saw of Kekiu Islam. Now, this is the stance that I take, and this is the stance I took all the time, all the while. One supporter, well, one of the same news organization that I was writing in, it was dominated by supporters of the Ghulam Azam. Now, I never ever paid any adherence to anything that Ghulam Azam said, ever. And I was not there to do that. I was there to write as I saw fit, as I said before. I didn't give a shit about any money because I didn't get any money. I didn't seek any money. And I didn't depend on the bloody money. And I wrote what I saw. Now, that paper had the habit of condemning Sheikh Mujib and promoting a man called Maulana Maududi. Now, this was East Pakistan, and the people were alien to Maududi because Maududi was not part of the culture of the people in East Pakistan, where Sheikh Mujib was. And whatever the differences there might be between what Sheikh Mujib said and individual politically conscious people would do, Sheikh Mujib was the natural kind of political activist in the context of that place. And yet they would publish Maududi's picture and his speeches on the front page, while at the same time condemn Sheikh Mujib. Now, I was not and never was a member of any party, not of Awami League, and I was not a fan of Sheikh Mujib or anybody. But the objectively examined evidence showed that they were wrong because they were unfairly criticizing Sheikh Mujib. And they were without justification, without any foundation, unfairly promoting Maududi. As I said, I spoke in English. I mean, these people, I spoke in English throughout, except very rare occasions when I didn't speak English. So one of these days, this man from West Pakistan, kind of just like the editor about the KQ Islam event, this man from West Pakistan sent a message to me to go and see him at another location. I went there and he said, "Why are you writing so many critical pieces about our party, our movement?" I said, "What? I am not criticizing your party. I'm not criticizing any of you. I'm criticizing what I see deserves criticism, the wrong things being said, wrong things being spewed, and above all, I'm criticizing liars who are misleading people, saying that Sheikh Mujib is a criminal and he has no right to have any say." Well, Sheikh Mujib may be criminal in some people's eyes, but he is not a criminal on every issue. And your party has no right to denounce him. In any case, when the country comes to a complete crisis, I didn't say anything about what happened in 1971. This was happening before that. This was happening the year before. I said, when the country comes to a worse crisis and dissension and disaffection between people, the likes of you would not be here, would not be in Dhaka. You would fly away and you would go to Karachi or Rawalpindi or someplace, and you would not be affected by any of it. But the ordinary people that you are using to spew slogans against Sheikh Mujib and other people, local people, they would be facing the real consequences. Now, this is what happened. But I wasn't aware that this would happen. But I knew that calculating on the evidence of their behavior, that was bound to happen. That is what I said. Now, in October, this is the month of October, I received, when I went to the office, it is daily newspapers were written mainly in the evening. The political stuff was written mainly in the evening. So I went there, and there was this man who is a younger brother of a Dhaka University academic. Academic's name is Hassan Zaman. And his brother, because of some kind of nepotism, was given the job. He got a job either as the editor or assistant editor, not editor, but news editor or something. And I got a letter from him on the table. This is amazingly hilarious. It said, with immediate effect, your services are no longer required. Now, I couldn't find him because he wasn't there personally. He had this thing delivered or put on my desk or put on the desk where I picked it up. So I asked for him. I said, has anyone seen this man? I couldn't find him, but if I could find him, which I didn't, I could have said, you are an idiot because I am not serving you. I'm not serving any of you. I'm writing for anyone who cares to pick up the paper and read. That's all I'm doing. So my services are not required. You have no right to say that because I'm not serving you. Now, like today, this is now what, 52 years later. Like today, all the mental slaves are on the one side, lined up, sucking up, and all the rest of it. And on the other side is me. I was doing that 52 years ago, you fucking morons. I have not done anything different because I'm not about sucking up to any liar or any crook of any description, of any faith or whatever, no faith. Everything I said in the last 52 years, let's say, starting from that, has been proven, absolutely proven, accurately proven, and I have been proven to have foreseen, forecast, even predicted every key event. All the supporters of the military in the period 71, all the military supporters, they were full of hatred. They were full of hatred against anyone who criticized the military. Now, they were not giving any reason. They were not giving historical reason, contextual reason based on any of the declarations for human rights, any of the founding declarations of the United Nations, etc., etc. Remember, this was only less than 25 years since the United Nations was founded. So the memories of the Nazis in the world were very, very raw memories. And the idea that any military regime should be treated as legitimate source of authority over democratic civilians, that should have been treated as repugnant, which I did. But as I've said, there was nobody that I could actually find as supporting or aligning with me on that. So Hassan Jaman's brother wrote that my services were no longer required. I couldn't find him. But if I found him, if I could find him, I would have asked him to engage in a debate about the purpose. Remember what Imran Khan has been saying? Pakistan ka matlab kya? La ilaha illallah. Now, that was not what the slogan was expressly, but that was what the purpose was, even at that time. So these people who claim to be supporters of, quote, united Pakistan, because although the liberation war had not been declared and anything similar to a war had not been declared, the public opinion was very clear that the people from West Pakistan, mainly the ruling post holders, looked down on the people of East Pakistan. That was beyond doubt. The only West Pakistani that didn't do that was Azam Khan. And Azam Khan was greeted by ordinary East Pakistanis wherever he went as a brother. He was the only brother. Now, if you look at Azam Khan's attitude and Munam Khan's attitude, now Munam Khan was from East Pakistan. I mean, there was no comparison. Munam Khan was a typical small-minded idiot who didn't have any time for ordinary people, whereas Azam Khan went out into the streets and met people and spoke with people, and nobody saw him any different from themselves. It's like Ruth First, the communist woman. Ruth First was murdered mysteriously. The South African activist, her husband Joe. Now he was a white man, mainly fighting against apartheid along with black people. And that saying goes that somebody said that, there is a white man supporting us as well, or words to that effect. I'm not quoting. And most of the people present who heard it said that that's not a white man, that's Joe. Now, Azam Khan was treated like a Joe in East Pakistan by the East Pakistanis. Probably because of that, Ayub Khan removed him from the post of governor of East Pakistan and moved him through, and we never heard of him really. The rest of their attitude has been brought back to my memory by Imran Khan saying a stupid thing about cyclones. I mean, while he is being hailed as the kind of current active opposition campaigner against the government and corrupt government, etc., Imran Khan says that he remembers, I mean, he admits that he wasn't old enough, but he remembers conversations about East Pakistan, that the East Pakistanis were kind of complaining. And the East Pakistanis were complaining because they said, according to him, they were not being helped on when they were hit by cyclones. Now, that is the attitude of an out and out imperialist. Imran Khan may say all kinds of things about Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah, but he, in that disgusting insult against East Pakistan, he comes across as an imperialist. How could he say that Pakistan ka matlab kya was la ilaha illallah when he is deriding, condemning, undermining the people of East Pakistan because the people of East Pakistan complained about the power holders from West Pakistan in the main not supporting the cyclone affected people of East Pakistan? How could he say that? He keeps saying that the Pakhtunwalas, 80,000 Pakhtunwalas lost their lives because of the American war on Afghanistan. He says the 80,000 Pakhtunwalas in a way that suggests that he is one of them. He is identifying himself with them. And yet, he says about East Pakistan as if East Pakistan is a million miles away. And he had nothing to do with it. The most he can do is manage to have a remote understanding about East Pakistan, but not as one of the East Pakistanis. Whereas whenever he says anything about the Pakhtunwala, he could easily be mistaken in his emotion as one of the surviving Pakhtunwala family members. Whereas in the case of East Pakistan, he refers to East Pakistan as a remote island or a remote place on a separate planet. This disgusting mental remoteness is the reason why so many people, not in any way inclined to be aligned with Sheikh Mujib or his party, were sympathetic to the main banner that Sheikh Mujib was carrying. How could Imran Khan be saying all of this in 2022? Has he not seen anything? Has he not learned anything in the 51 years or so that have passed since 16th of December 1971? If he has not learned anything about East Pakistan, then he cannot be treated as suitable leader of Pakistan, what remains of Pakistan. And when he talks about his Qaid, his ideological leader, Muhammad Iqbal, and his political leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, it doesn't show Imran Khan in any way as equal to Jinnah or Iqbal. When he talks about the Prophet and the Hadiths and all that, he does not come across convincing because he's, as the lawyer, as the member of the Lahore Bar Association, in that brief speech last month, I think, correctly said, the real East Pakistan, the real Pakistan was East Pakistan. So what happened in 1971 was the end of Pakistan. That's it. That's what he said effectively. Now, Imran Khan has referred to Bangladesh a few times. Most of his references have been about Imran Khan's knowledge about Bangladesh and the people of Bangladesh, about their love of the game of cricket. And he has mentioned more than once that the Bangladeshis always take the side of the Pakistani cricket team as against the Indian cricket team. Now, that surely cannot be the main test. Of course, it is, for various reasons, true factually. But that cannot be the test, that cannot be the evidence, the main evidence. The main evidence is about human rights, about fairness, about equality. Main evidence is about what is happening based on the faith, what is happening to Muslims all over the world. And that is what Jinnah was trying to avoid. Jinnah and others who fought the then versions of Hindutva mobs, they were trying to say, protect the future Muslims of the subcontinent from the kinds of things that are happening now. Rohingyas and Muslims in China, Muslims in Chechnya, and Muslims all over the world, where Muslims are being discriminated against. So that was a stunning intellectual achievement to come to the formula of electoral electoral process of creating a state. Because the state of Pakistan was created by election. Number of people, majority of people voting for a particular area. That then logically was the foundation of the country. It wasn't based on military engagements. But that was done after Jinnah was frustrated by the Hindutva nationalists and Hindutva fanatics from keeping the Hindus and Muslims united. It was a last minute thing. Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry is so stupid and ignorant, he would not accept that. He would not even know that. But I said to the liar Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry, go to Bikrampur. Bikrampur in Dhaka, in Bangladesh today, is the ancestral home of Sarojini Naidu. Sarojini Chakraborty or Chattopadhyay, whatever, she was a Brahmin woman. She came from a Hindu Brahmin family in Bikrampur in Dhaka. It is Sarojini Naidu as the married name who wrote in 1917 that documentary book dedicated to Jinnah's work in uniting Hindus and Muslims against the imperialists. Jinnah is the last person to be condemned for anything he did about the future of the Muslims in the subcontinent. And anyone who condemns Jinnah does that out of ignorance. So for example, in the current state of Bangladesh, which compared to West Pakistan, what is now Pakistan, per capita kind of income and per capita kind of population, I mean, West Pakistan, or what is now Pakistan, is several times bigger than as big as Bangladesh. A united Pakistan could have been shared by lots and lots of millions and millions and millions of East Pakistanis being settled in West Pakistan land. Think about that. And so on. So the debate was not conducted within the Awami League or through the Awami League about the future of the country. And now, climate change apart, the entire Bangladesh, southern Bangladesh, main Bangladesh, across the southern kind of shores and areas, coasts, everyone says geologically Bangladesh is sinking. So where are these Bangladeshis, millions? Where are the Bangladeshis going to go? Looking at the reception, Modi's reception to the Rohingyas, Bangladeshis would have to take another 5 generations before they get settled in the new place, if they ever got new place in any part of what is now India. In Assam, these people, Muslims, Assami Muslims, have been there and their ancestors have been there for hundreds of years. And they have been denied Indian registration by Modi and Amit Shah and the Hindutva brigade. The silence by Sheikh Hasina about everything that Modi has been doing is a silence not about Modi, but is a silence in denying the human rights of the Bengalis, because those people, many of them in Assam, for all kinds of reasons, are categorized as Bengalis. So where is the Bengali nation now? The only Bengali who is doing a legitimate political battle in India in the context of the Hindutva and the Hindutva-centric future of India is, of course, Mamata Banerjee. She is another Brahmin woman, but she too is enlightened because she learned about Islam. She did graduate and postgraduate studies about Islam. Whereas Sheikh Hasina has not shown any comparable recognition, respect to Islam. Now, whatever Mamata Banerjee has been doing has been far less complete than it should have been. But given the context of a Hindutva kind of dominated India and the entire West Bengal intellectuals being hostile to Muslims, the steps that Mamata Banerjee has been taking, as I say, have been imperfect, but they have been overall the right step and the correct steps to establish human rights of the Muslims in West Bengal and in the rest of India. Now imagine the number of Muslims in the whole current Republic of India. They amount to the number as many people in India, as many people, Muslims in India, as the entire population of Germany, France, Sweden, UK. How, how, how much? This is the entire, almost the whole of Western Europe is there in India as a minority. How can that be? And Hasina is failing there, and Imran Khan is failing as well. It is not. It is not through stupidities like nuclear kind of warfare. How can that be? I mean, the fact that these two countries are showing the extent of their hatred of one another by acquiring nuclear weapons. I mean, it's lunacy. How many people would they save? I mean, that will be annihilation. They don't talk about it. No one talks about it. Everyone, I mean, in India, in the mainstream, is kind of appeasing the murderous Hindutva plot and plotters. And Sheikh Hasina, who does she hope will save Bangladesh? Modi and Hindutva or her party? Her party doesn't exist, never has existed ideologically. Because if the Awami League had existed ideologically, in reality, apart from the minds of some academics, some college lecturers, then Sheikh Mujib would not have been murdered, because there would have been a long democratic tradition of telling the truth about the future of the country, future of society, future capacities, and there would have been enough tolerance, cooperation, accountability in practice, and there would be no need for the criminal adventure of the Bakshal. Anyone who calls themselves Bakshalite, let them come forward. And when Sheikh Mujib was murdered in August 1975, all these Bakshalites went into permanent hibernation. They sank completely for years. It is the Bakshalites that prodded, pushed Mujib to be declared Bakshal. As I said, Mujib was politically disorganized, chaotic, and he had no idea what he was doing when it came to Bakshal and his approving of Bakshal. Because everything that he went to jail for, and he was jailed for by the Pakistanis or the Pakistan army, everything that he opposed in the behavior of the West Pakistani armies, military, was contained in the formulation of Bakshal. And secondly, as I said about the people of Tar Hamlers, if there is no kind of concept of internal democratic accountability among the electorate in a particular area, say in Tar Hamlers, then anyone elected from them or chosen from amongst them to become the Superman as the elected mayor is going to completely misbehave and become a total shit, not accountable to anyone, not showing any respect, not showing any shame. The amount of Tower Hamlets Council resources that were given, shared among crooks during Lutfur Rahman's years before he was declared persona non grata by none of the crooks that benefited from Lutfur Rahman's corruption has ever had the courage to speak out and defend any of the Lutfur Rahman corrupt deals. Now the circumstances, of course, were very different in terms of the ouster. Whereas Richard Morey procedurally ended the regime of Lutfur Rahman to an end, Sheikh Mujib's enemies and critics and opponents did it in a very completely different way. And what they did, the reason why they murdered him had a lot to do with the fact that Bakshal had been declared. And a lot of people in the country openly were concerned about the appearance of a fascist regime. Now, the fascist regime, administered and controlled by the Awami League, which had two of the most ferocious members of the Sheikh Mujib family at the forefront. Kamal and Jamal, the two sons of Sheikh Mujib. People were already horrified, petrified by the prospect of Bakshal in the country. And as I said, one man who was a member of the Sheikh Mujib fan club, he remains a member of the fan club, has said repeatedly to me and other people, he's a Bengali, not a Siloti. He has said in London, in the UK, that he was scared stiff for his life. He knew that it was only a matter of time, any minute, he could be murdered by Sheikh Mujib's son, either Jamal or Kamal. So this man went to the CIA, that is the American diplomatic place in Bangladesh. And the CIA took him out of Bangladesh in a special arrangement, as part of a special arrangement. Just like many of the Americans and British people were, let's say, salvaged from Afghanistan, this man was salvaged out of Bangladesh, and he still lives, and he recognizes openly the help that the CIA gave him, and his life was saved. Of course, this man made contacts with the CIA before as part of the Sheikh Mujib kind of regime's general supporter. So Sheikh Mujib allowed a completely chaotic kind of reign. There was no democracy and there was no accountability. So people are afraid of the Bakshal on the one hand, Sheikh Mujib's children on the other hand, the two sons especially. And they knew that Sheikh Mujib was politically absolutely isolated in the run up to this murder. Politically isolated. Remember the period of open starvation, which the cunt Lawrence Lifshulz and others blame on the Americans. The Awami League crooks stole the resources and caused the main starvation and hunger. I mean, to the point that women couldn't wear clothes to protect their modesty. And that hungry women and children were taken on cars and on trucks, and truckloads of such people were driven out of Bangladesh capital Dhaka and driven to outskirts of Dhaka. How many of them died? Nobody knows. Now this was happening in the years before Sheikh Mujib was murdered. And Sheikh Mujib is not on the record. Sheikh Mujib is not on the record as comprehensively holding the thugs of the Awami League thugs and goons responsible for the real chaos that was reigning the country. So whoever says that Sheikh Mujib is the best human being or best Bengali is, of course, living in the stupidest fantasy. Sheikh Mujib was an agitator, but he was not doing most of his tasks. That doesn't mean, none of that means that he should be murdered. Point is that he was not a superman and he was not being responsible as the head of state, head of government, to the majority, overwhelming majority of the people that were dying, that were being denied justice. That was because Sheikh Mujib was not leader of a democratic movement. In the months before the 1970 election, a very strange thing happened in front of the Baitul Mukarram Mosque in Dhaka. About 50 to 100, mainly male individuals aged about 30 or under, maintained regular daily noise creation near the mosque. And the noise was completely lunatic. It had no rhyme or reason. It was noisy, and it was intended to interrupt and disrupt the mosque and the prayers and the serenity of the atmosphere that should have prevailed. This was not a democratic event. This was not a democratic campaign. This was some aliens brought from somewhere, wherever they came from, brought there to mess up the country. And Sheikh Mujib must have been totally, absolutely politically asleep.